Right, so picture this. You're Keir Starmer sitting in number 10, probably sipping some overpriced oat milk latte, thinking you've got this whole Prime Minister thing sorted. You've defeated Rishi Sunak, you've got Labour back in power, and you've promised the British public you're going to smash the gangs bringing illegal migrants across the channel. Brilliant plan, really inspiring stuff. And then GB News rocks up with Mark White standing on the Dover clifftops, hair blowing dramatically in the wind, counting boats like he's hosting some twisted version of Sesame Street. Except instead of counting cookies, he's counting nearly 600 people who've just crossed in a 12-hour window. Awkward, very awkward. Welcome back to UK Political Insight, where we break down the political chaos so you don't have to. Let's talk about Starmer's migrant crisis nightmare and why this latest update is basically the political equivalent of stepping on a rake. So here's what happened. Nana Akua and Tom Harwood are doing their thing on GB News, discussing whatever political drama was on the menu for the day, when suddenly they cut to breaking news. And not the fun kind of breaking news, like someone's cat wandering into Parliament or Boris Johnson spotted buying hair gel in bulk. No, this was serious stuff. Mark White, standing at Dover Harbour looking windswept and probably regretting his career choices, delivers the bombshell that over 500 migrants have crossed the channel in just 12 hours. 12 hours! That's less time than it takes to binge watch a season of your favourite Netflix show. And we've got more people making the dangerous crossing than you'd find at a mid-sized music festival. White explains that border force vessels and lifeboats have been scrambling to respond to this surge, all because there was a tiny weather window. A tiny weather window. Basically, the migrants and the smuggling gangs saw a few hours of decent weather and thought, right, this is our moment, let's go for it. It's like when British people see the sun for 5 minutes and immediately strip down to shorts and start planning barbecues, except infinitely more dangerous and desperate. White counted at least 423 migrants coming off various boats throughout the day, and that doesn't even include the last vessel, which pushed the total closer to 500. Oh, and there was another boat that crossed overnight with 74 people on board, bringing the grand total well over 500, pushing towards 600, all in one 12-hour stretch. Just let that sink in for a moment. Now, if you're Keir Starmer, this is basically your worst nightmare wrapped in a migrant crisis bow. Because here's the thing, Starmer has been banging on about his plan to smash the gangs since before he even got into office. It was one of his big promises, one of those sound bites designed to make voters think, ah yes, this guy's got a plan, he's going to sort this mess out. But the reality, the numbers tell a very different story. We've now passed 40,000 small boat arrivals this year. 40,000! That's roughly the population of a decent-sized town. Imagine an entire town's worth of people arriving by small boat, risking their lives in the channel, and you start to get a sense of the scale of this crisis. And here's where it gets even more uncomfortable for Starmer. Mark White, standing there on the Dover clifftops getting battered by the wind because the weather window had already closed, made a rather pointed observation. He said, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, but this is the gist, whatever politicians have told us about government policy making a difference, it's obvious that it's the weather controlling these crossings. The weather. Not government policy, not clever strategies or international cooperation or smashing the gangs, the weather. Mother Nature is doing more to control channel crossings than the entire Home Office. If that's not a damning indictment of current policy, I don't know what is. Let's take a step back and think about what smash the gangs actually means. In theory, it sounds great. You target the criminal networks organising these dangerous crossings, you disrupt their operations, you make it harder for them to operate, and eventually the crossings decrease. Simple, right? Except nothing in politics is ever simple, especially when it comes to immigration. These smuggling gangs aren't operating out of some easily identified headquarters with a neon sign saying, "Criminal smuggling operation, please raid here." They're sophisticated, they're networked, and crucially they operate largely outside of UK jurisdiction. Most of these operations are based in France or further afield, which means Starmer's government needs international cooperation to make any real dent in their activities. And while the UK and France have been working on this issue, clearly it's not working well enough. The other problem, and this is where things get really sticky, is that smashing the gangs doesn't address why people are so desperate to make these crossings in the first place. These aren't people taking a leisurely boat trip across the channel for fun. These are people fleeing war, persecution, poverty, and unimaginable circumstances who see getting to the UK as their best or only option. The gangs exist because there's demand. As long as people are desperate enough to pay thousands of pounds and risk their lives in overcrowded dinghies in one of the world's busiest shipping lanes, the gangs will find a way to profit. It's basic economics, really, supply and demand, except instead of iPhones or trainers, we're talking about human lives. Now, the responses to this latest surge have been predictably split. GB News viewers, according to the article, flocked to social media to share their thoughts. One person wrote, "Stop the boats," they said, with what I can only imagine was a heavy dose of sarcasm. Because yes, "Stop the boats" was the Conservative Party's big slogan under Rishi Sunak. And look how well that worked out. Spoiler alert, they didn't stop the boats. The boats kept coming. And now Labour's in charge with their smash the gangs version, and surprise, surprise, the boats are still coming. It's almost like complex international migration issues can't be solved with three-word slogans. Who knew? Another viewer suggested putting British soldiers on the beaches of France to protect our borders and stop the boats, which, setting aside the minor detail that France is a sovereign nation and we can't just deploy military forces there without permission, really highlights the level of frustration people feel about this issue. But here's the reality check. Even if you could militarize the French coastline, these crossings would likely continue. People would find different routes, different methods. When people are desperate enough, barriers don't stop them. Barriers just make the journey more dangerous. And this is where we need to talk about what's missing from the conversation. Because right now, the debate is entirely focused on enforcement. Stop the boats, smash the gangs, increase border force patrols, whatever. But very little political capital is being spent on discussing safe and legal routes for asylum seekers, processing claims more efficiently, or addressing the root causes that drive migration in the first place. It's all stick and no carrot, which historically has never worked particularly well when it comes to migration policy. Think about it this way. If you're fleeing persecution or war, and your options are either risk everything on a dangerous channel crossing or wait years in limbo with no guarantee of ever being processed, what would you choose? The current system essentially incentivizes dangerous crossings because there aren't sufficient legal alternatives. And I know, this is where someone in the comments is going to say, but they should claim asylum in the first safe country they reach, which sounds reasonable until you realize that puts an enormous, disproportionate burden on countries that happen to be geographically closer to conflict zones. Greece, Italy, and Spain would essentially bear the entire responsibility for EU asylum claims under that logic. It's not a workable solution, and it's not particularly fair either. So, where does this leave Starmer? Well, in a bit of a pickle, to put it mildly. His smash the gangs policy isn't delivering the results he promised, the numbers are climbing, the weather is dictating policy outcomes more than the Home Office, and the opposition are absolutely loving it. You can bet the Conservatives, despite their own spectacular failure to solve this issue when they were in power, are going to be hammering Labour over these figures. Politics has a wonderfully short memory when it's convenient. Rishi Sunak couldn't stop the boats, but that won't stop Conservative MPs from demanding to know why Starmer hasn't either. It's the circle of political life. The real question is what happens next, because we're now at a point where the annual small boat arrivals have exceeded 40,000 people. That's not a small issue that can be swept under the rug or managed with a few press releases. This requires serious policy rethinking, genuine international cooperation, and probably some uncomfortable conversations about what Britain's responsibilities are in terms of asylum and refugees. But those conversations are difficult, they don't fit neatly into sound bites, and require politicians to be honest with the public about trade-offs and limitations. And let's be real, modern politics isn't exactly known for embracing nuance and complexity. What we're likely to see instead is more of the same, more announcements about crackdowns, more promises to get tough on smuggling gangs, more border force patrols, and more weather-dependent crossing numbers that spike every time there's a calm day in the Channel. Meanwhile, the fundamental issues driving this crisis remain unaddressed. People continue risking their lives in dangerous crossings, and politicians on all sides continue pretending that three-word slogans constitute meaningful policy. The Dover clifftops where Mark White stood delivering his report will see this scene play out again and again. Border force vessels returning to harbour, migrants being processed, numbers being counted, and politicians scrambling to explain why their policies haven't solved a problem that probably can't be solved through enforcement alone. It's frustrating, it's tragic, and it's a mess